Hey there, and welcome to 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron along with Alex Speier, coming out of our Thanksgiving comas, our food-induced sluggishness, tryptophan behind us, ready to go with an exciting week ahead, closing in towards the winter meetings. But first, Alex Speier, how was your Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was great. Got to spend time around some family members that I don't get a lot of time to see, a lot of opportunity to see. So from that standpoint, it was fantastic. Also, also fatiguing in the way that that it becomes when you're around people you don't get to see a lot, but like in the most wonderful way. So how about so mine was great. How about you, Tom?
It was great. My first turkey that we've done turkey before, but I was in charge of the turkey this year. Incredible stress, but nailed it. The turkey was fantastic. The food was great. Welcomed the new dog into the greater family. Our son and daughter-in-law brought Gertie to town, who was overwhelmed by the food and the noise and the people. But she was great. And for the second annual Thanksgiving, we were out in the back here in Maine, and we rolled the four-wheeler. This time I was in the four-wheeler while we rolled it, which was an interesting experience, but all was good. Shout out to Honda. Their safety mechanism worked perfectly. The seatbelts stayed engaged. Everybody was good. So last year I got to watch as the two boys and our niece were out rolling around in the snow, and then literally rolling around in the snow. And this year, my son Jack was driving and literally was saying, you know, what happened last year was I did this, and bang, we did it again. So there you go.
Well, I suppose that's a lab experiment that is replicable. So congratulations to Jack. Glad everyone's okay.
Here. Yeah, everybody's fine. The moments after we did our last episode, or that it came out, the news came out that Sonny Gray had been acquired by the Red Sox. So the first time we're here to talk about it, Richard Fitz, Brandon Clark, the two young pitchers who go. The dust is settled about a week now. Alex, with a little bit of perspective, what do you make of the deal?
Well, I think that it clearly upgrades the Red Sox rotation compared to where it was in the absence of Sonny Gray, right? If you were to compare the 2025 version of Sonny Gray to, let's say, Lucas Giolito or Walker Buehler, he represents an upgrade over those two guys based on the fact that he was able to get as much swing and miss as he did. He proved more durable than Giolito over the course of that season, even though Giolito is a bit younger and is a physically more imposing pitcher who you would kind of forecast more durability with. Sonny Gray's managed to be a relatively healthy pitcher over the course of 13 big league seasons, and he's pulled down an average of over 170 innings over the last 3 seasons. So from that vantage point, I think that you could probably make a pretty good case that he is better right now, or forecast to be better than Brayan Bello right now, based on the swing, the frequency of the swing and miss, the volume of strikeouts that he's able to get. He does a good job of managing contact most of the time. So Red Sox rotation is better, but then there's that big kind of hovering question of, does Sonny Gray meet the criteria that Craig Breslow had outlined a couple of weeks earlier when he said that he wanted someone to pitch alongside or immediately behind Garrett Crochet in a rotation? And I think that's a fair question. I think that you can. It's kind of debatable whether or not. How do you see it, Tom? For you, what is a number 2 starter, and where does Gray fall in that? Within that definition?
I hate to say it, but it feels like he falls a little bit short of what we were talking about, right? I mean, I think he is a really good number 3 on this rotation right now. I think, obviously he would be the number 2 coming out of camp. The hope would be that by season's end, Brayan Bello would finally establish himself as more of a number 2, but he's not there yet. So I think we will all love this deal if another pitcher is coming, and that's what we're all waiting to see, right? It feels a little bit like Walker Buehler 2.0, and that didn't work. Doesn't mean this won't work. They're different guys completely, right? The interesting numbers last year, the ERA was a little high, but the strikeout to walk ratio is obviously exceptional, amongst the best. And he posts, he might not go 8 innings a night, but he'll make 30 to 33 starts a season. And you start adding up those 5 and 6 inning starts, you're knocking on the door of 200 innings, 200 strikeouts. So I think, to your point, it makes them better. Does it make them good enough to be where they want to be, especially with the reports that Dylan Cease is going to Toronto? Like, how do you stack up against the rest of the American League East in the arms race? I think right now you're still one pitcher away. If that is a depth guy, it'll be interesting to see what the reaction is, right? If that other pitcher they go to is not a knockdown, drag-out number two, per se, but a guy who maybe slots in later, then we'll see what the reaction to all this is. But right now, as we sit here in the early days of December, I think it's a good deal. It makes them better. You lost both Giolito and Buehler. If you go back, want to run it back to the beginning of last year, this replaces one of those arms.
Yeah, on the depth guy front, the Red Sox have already added that pitcher, and his name is Patrick Sandoval. He just happened to be signed before the 2025 season and didn't pitch during it, right, as he was rehabbing from Tommy John surgery. But there's your kind of like your guy who's been thrown into the mix for the back of the rotation. But yeah, I think that it gets to a very interesting question when you are looking at, the Yankees are going to be, the Yankees obviously have Max Fried. They are expecting Garrett Cole back at some point. They have Rodon and Schlittler available as kind of 3 and 4, 3 and 4 starters in the rotation. That's pretty deep, and that's pretty formidable in terms of high octane arms. And then the Blue Jays are going to have are going to be rolling out Gossman and now Dylan Cease as big time swing and miss guys. It'll be interesting to see where things go with like Yasavage in his first full season and Barrios. They part of the reason why they've been able to come to agreement with Cease is because Scherzer and Chris Bassett, the latter of whom, really good pitcher, really interesting pitcher for a long period of time. But with Cease, they're kind of raising the ceiling. What kind of pressure does that put on the Red Sox with regards to their roster building if they want to back up the claim that they're pushing for the division rather than just kind of settling for competition at the wild card spot?
It's interesting, right? Chaim Bloom of the now running the St. Louis Cardinals makes the deal with his former team. So plenty of storylines to look at. So we'll bring in someone who does a great job covering the Cardinals for The Athletic, Katie Woo of The Athletic. Got to cover all of it from the St. Louis side. Let's get a little perspective from her. Katie Woo from The Athletic here on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. 310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. And we're joined by Katie Woo of The Athletic as we kind of put this all in perspective. But interesting to hear from the other side, because we well know the other side. We know Chaim Bloom, and he does his first deal with his former team. Katie, thanks for joining us. What was the reaction, and what was it like hearing Chaim explain how his first deal with his former team came together?
Yeah, we started seeing the news come in, Sonny Gray to the Red Sox, and immediately my first thought was, yeah, that checks out. That makes sense. If you're going to make your first major trade with a new organization, it makes sense to tap into an organization that you know well. For the Sonny Gray trade from the St. Louis perspective, this wasn't necessarily a surprise. Sonny said to reporters at the end of the season that he would consider waiving his no-trade clause. He came to St. Louis to win. The Cardinals are obviously rebuilding. Those two narratives don't exactly fit. For Sonny Gray, it wasn't necessarily a question of if he would go, it was a question of when. And then if he'd be able to find a team that he would waive his no-trade clause for. Obviously, the Cardinals really like what they saw in Richard Fitts and their prospect Brandon Clark. Sonny Gray gets to go to a contender, winners all around. But it was definitely, at least for me, a little funny to see the connection there and just kind of think, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, quite a thing to make to have your first trade be with your former organization. Although he didn't acquire anyone who he had with the Red Sox, right? He ended up with Richard Fitts. Although the Cardinals, interestingly, had been actually when Chaim Bloom was still with the Red Sox, he was looking into the acquisition of Richard Fitts at the trade deadline in 2023 when there were the early conversations between the Yankees and Red Sox about Alex Verdugo. But neither here nor there. They end up sending Fitts over to the Cardinals as well as Brandon Clark. what is Sonny Gray right now? I think that's the big question, because Craig Breslow had outlined this idea that the Red Sox were looking to add someone who could pitch alongside or immediately behind Garrett Crochet in the rotation. You've gotten a chance to see a lot of Sonny Gray over the last 2 years. How would you describe his stature right now? Not literally, he's short. We know that. I'm pro short people. But where does he slot in a rotation for a team that is looking to contend?
Yes, we are pro short kings on this podcast. No arguments here. I think with Sonny Gray, I've seen a lot of discourse, and it's fair discourse, if he's an actual number 2 starter or if he's a number 3. Now, keep in mind, the Cardinals had him as a number 1. That's a different story. More or less speaks to the state of their rotation. I think he can go either way for me. It just depends on what version of Sonny Gray you're getting. In this day and age with pitchers, there are 2 phrases that we can describe starters. One is innings eater, and the other is strike thrower. Now, Sonny Gray is not the former. You can expect him on an average start to log around 5 to 6 innings, 6 on a good day. Every now and then he'll go 7. But he is a strike thrower, and he has one of the best breaking balls in the game. Most people call it a sweeper. He refers to it as a slider. Whatever it is, it's super effective. It's led to 2 consecutive 200-plus strikeout seasons for the Cardinals. He led their rotation in swing and miss. If you're looking for a guy that's going to put batters away, Sonny Gray can do exactly that. Now, I think where his stuff is right now, you look at what he did for St. Louis last season, just over 180 innings, made all 32 starts, and had a 4.28 ERA. That's well above his career mark of around 3.5. That ERA is inflated just a little bit because there were 3 or 4 just truly disastrous starts that were very uncharacteristic for Sonny Gray, where he just lacked command of essentially all of his pitches. I thought for the most part, we saw a very formidable season from Sonny Gray, but those numbers for me say number 3. Now, this is not to say that he can't go and achieve that number 2 status, but I do understand the discourse between fans and saying, is he more of a middle of the rotation guy at this point of his career? Or can he find, his all-star success that he saw with the Cardinals in his first year, or of course, when he finished second in Cy Young voting with the Twins?
For me, there's kind of an interesting question, because Sonny Gray is someone who, I mean, you know him much better than I, but seems to have very defined opinions about what he needs to do to be successful as a pitcher. One thing that kind of jumps out when you look at the Baseball Savant page, his 4-seam fastball really got hit. It wasn't a pitch that was used tremendously frequently, right? I think that it was like 22%, something like that usage rate, but that was the highest usage of any pitch that he had, and it was his worst pitch. How open-minded do you think that he'll be to conversations with the Red Sox about, we think that you should kind of turn the dials, maybe use the slider a little bit, the slider sweeper, whatever you want to call the breaking ball, as you noted. How open-minded is he going to be? Or is he someone who really he's 36. He's been doing this a long time. Does he have his own thoughts about what he should be doing to be the most effective version of himself?
I don't want to suggest Sonny Gray is someone to be set in his ways. I don't think he is that way at all. He is just someone that is eager to take in any kind of information possible. And if you can get him started on a specific pitch or a specific grip, just pull up a seat, because they're going to be there a while. It's going to be around a 20 to 30-minute conversation. And that's him just going without any breaks. So I do think he'll be open-minded to what the Red Sox could do differently with that arsenal. You make a great point about the fastball. Without the fastball, the sweeper, slider, whatever, doesn't play as effectively. He does have that 6-pitch arsenal and uses all those pitches fairly frequently. But the fastball really kind of plays into how he sets up the strikeout. Now, he was able to pitch around that for most of the season, even with the fastball getting hit hard. So there is a silver lining there. But he is maybe going to have to tweak some things to establish more of the success that he saw in his first year with St. Louis. Again, just a couple of those outings. There was one in Philadelphia that was particularly egregious, and that was just the fastball getting hammered. So if you can limit the fastball damage, you'll see him able to go more into the 6th inning. Again, maybe the 7th, just depends on his pitch count. He was someone that did not necessarily love the St. Louis humidity either. I can relate to that. And that was something that he said he really struggled with in the summertime, was adjusting to the heat, the sweat, all of that. I'm not sure if Boston's going to play as effectively in the humidity regard there. So there's also something to keep in mind at that point. But yeah, I think Sonny Gray, while being very convicted about his beliefs and knowing who he is as a pitcher, will certainly be at least a little open-minded to how the Red Sox can hopefully unlock a different level for his arsenal.
Katie, the talk in St. Louis was that he was going to be traded if they could find somebody to move him to, right? The big question was, as you mentioned at the top, would he drop the no waive clause and the no trade clause, and who would he waive it for? Ultimately, it's the Red Sox. Is that a surprise at all from like watching him and waiting to see who he might agree to go to? Were you surprised that he agreed to go to Boston?
I was a little bit just from the location. I think Sonny Gray, you mentioned this, Alex, he's 36 years old. He's coming into his 14th year as a professional. He has 2 kids, and he really wanted to be close to home. He resides in Nashville. So I was looking at Atlanta and then Cincinnati, of course, because that's a team that he almost signed with before signing with St. Louis. But Boston, I think, checks what he wants as a competitor. This is a team that's on the rise. This is a team that seems to be investing in their major league roster. And this is a team that's going to be competitive in, I think, one of the most competitive divisions, if not the most competitive division in baseball right now. And I know that there's a lot of conversation about how Sonny Gray fared in a big market with the Yankees. And I think that's a little unfair because we don't really know what's gone on there. There was maybe some disconnect with the pitching coach there. I would say it was less to do with the market, but we'll find out certainly. When you look at Sonny Gray's career, I mean, Oakland, Minnesota, and St. Louis, these are all small to mid-market teams. I, for one, am interested to see why and how he went to Boston and how he's going to react to a media market that is definitely far different from his last 2 organizations.
You know, one of the things they liked in Walker Buehler a year ago is the experience he was bringing to a young pitching staff, right? Lucas Giolito was part of that as well. What do we know about, what can you share with fans about Sonny Gray in the clubhouse? What kind of guy is he with the pitching group around him?
So something that surprised me after the 2024 season when it was announced that former president of baseball operations John Mozeliak would step down and Chaim Bloom would take over in 2026 was that Sonny Gray wanted to stay for this unorthodox transition year the Cardinals just did. And one of the reasons was because he was still convinced the Cardinals could win here. And the other reason was because he liked being a mentor to what was a very young and inexperienced starting pitching staff. And I asked him, how come we didn't know this about you in the 2024 season? And that year, the Cardinals had a very heavy veteran rotation. They had Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Miles Michaelis, and Sonny was new to the organization. So I think he was still kind of felt like this wasn't necessarily his rotation to step in and lead. He certainly did not feel that way in 2025. He was with any starter that would listen. He was out there offering advice, taking them under his wing. It was a trying season for a lot of these young guys as they adjusted to a starting role for the first time. But that was something that Sonny said he really enjoyed doing. Now, obviously, when he gets to this point in his career, he's made it very clear that he wants to win. So I can understand the change in heart with the direction. But I have no doubt that once he adjusts to Boston and kind of gets his feet under him in a new organization, he'll again be one of those guys that hopefully that young pitchers can go to for advice because that's a role he really does genuinely enjoy.
Katie, it was interesting for me sitting in on that conference call with Chaim after the trade went down to hear people asking about rebuild and kind of there's a dance around the language there, right? Like one of the first things that I did early on in Chaim's tenure in Boston, I wrote a story saying like, what is this if not a rebuild, right? Even though no one had been willing to use that language. Where do the Cardinals go from here, and who else do you think they're going to be moving this offseason?
Well, old habits die hard, I guess, because Chaim has been very particular to avoid the exact phrase of rebuild. But, let's read the room. Let's call it what it is. It is a rebuild in St. Louis. And I think when you're looking at what his job is going to be going forward, it is to make more of these difficult decisions for the short term. And I thought Chaim said something that was very eye-opening in his introductory press conference at the end of September. I'll paraphrase. He said, essentially, he wants to get the Cardinals back to being where they should be, which is perennial contenders, not these wild card participation trophy berths that they've gotten over the last couple of years. And then, of course, they've missed the playoffs the last 3 years entirely. He wants to get there, and he's not going to take any shortcuts to doing so. That means in order to find long-term success, he is going to make short-term sacrifices. And I thought his first major move, which was the Sonny Gray trade, backed up exactly that. He's going to have even more difficult decisions to make as we head into the winter meetings. What will the Cardinals do with Brendan Donovan, who is garnering significant trade interest across the league? What about Nolan Arenado, who they essentially have to move, but obviously, as we know, much easier said than done. There are going to be decisions that are absolutely going to mirror a rebuild. And for a fan base in St. Louis that has essentially never really experienced one, I, for one, am curious to see how both Chaim and the fan base interact on that. And then what the Cardinals actually look like in 2026. I believe it's going to be far, far different than anything we've seen in recent history here.
Katie, I ask you finally, Richard Fitz, obviously further ahead than Brandon Clark. Does Fitz make the rotation this coming season out of camp?
Right now, yes, because they don't really have anything else. That has been a big
Hmm.
problem for the Cardinals is their starting pitching depth. Right now, their starting rotation, I think combined, has about 5 total years of major league experience. So that was something that they wanted to land in any kind of trade was pitching depth in general. And right now, Richard Fitz kind of slots in as their number 3 or 4 guy. So where I highly doubt, or I'd be very surprised if this is the rotation that takes the field come opening day. The Cardinals have made it clear that they're looking to acquire at least one free agent starter or a durable starter via trade just to kind of help this young rotation. But right now, it seems pretty clear that Richard Fitz is in their rotation plans. They're going to need at least 2 or 3 more arms to complete that rotation, though.
All right, we'll be watching it. Mostly we'll be watching Sonny Gray here in Boston. Katie, we appreciate the background. Thanks for dropping by.
You got it, guys. Thanks so much.
All right, great stuff from Katie. We appreciate her visit. It is interesting when you take a look at Richard Fitz now. She's talking about him being in the middle of the rotation as we sit here. Obviously, I think Bloom will make more deals as he starts to take over that franchise and move them in the direction he wants. But we'll be watching closely to see what Richard Fitz does because he's a guy who flashed some promise here in his time with the Sox.
Yeah, he made some considerable strides from over the course of the last offseason in terms of adding power to his stuff. He was throwing his fastball harder coming in spring training last year. He had added a nice depth curveball that gave a different look and really varied what he was doing. He was working with different pitch grips in order to get to a kick change, in order to be able to create a little bit of a different movement profile to try to establish himself as a starter. Won that fifth starter spot out of spring training, looked great in spring training, looked really good in the first couple of starts of the regular season, and then had that pectoral strain. And after that, it seemed like he was just kind of like always a little bit behind, like he just never had his feet underneath him at any point where he was able to recapture what he had shown in spring training, even though he was throwing hard at various points. I think that he was flirting with 100 at a certain point, and so there were progressive steps forward. But to me, it's an interesting kind of not full circle moment, 180-degree moment for the Red Sox, because this is Chaim Bloom's first acquisition with the Cardinals, but this was Craig Breslow's first acquisition as the chief baseball officer of the Red Sox following Chaim Bloom. And the reason why Breslow felt like they needed to add a guy like Richard Fitz was because they had zero starting pitching depth, right? The back of the Red Sox rotation did not have minor leaguers who were ready to contribute at the major league level in a starting pitching capacity. And so Fitz is now expendable because they do have those guys. They have the guys like Connolly Early and like Peyton Tolley, among others. We mentioned Patrick Sandoval. They have him in the mix as well. There are, and again, there's like Luis Perales, who's going to be in the rotation to start in Worcester, in all likelihood to start the year. He could compete for a big league bullpen spot. Same thing with David Sandlin. So the Red Sox have changed. Where the status of their pipeline has changed, and with it, Richard Fitz was someone who they could deal. Same thing with Brandon Clark, who was the kind of like high upside arm that they didn't have a lot of in their system without much of a floor because his control is all over the place. But for the Cardinals, they need a guy like this. They don't have a guy like this. For the Red Sox, they do have some of these lottery ticket arms that allowed them to feel okay trading a guy like Brandon Clark.
Also, really interesting that in the end, they choose this and what they save a couple $1 million compared to had they kept Giolito on the qualifying offer, right? And so it is interesting when you sort of compare those decisions. Could you have kept Giolito for $22 million on the qualifying offer and kept those two young pitchers? Instead, you go this way and you have to trade away some of that depth to get a guy who comes in at $20 million. I think that's a comparison we'll be keeping an eye on as next season goes along.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very interesting one because, look, Lucas Giolito was a really good pitcher for the Red Sox for about 3.5 months. Once he figured things out in early June, he got his delivery back in sync coming off of that missed year. He got his release point back to where it needed to be in order to be a more effective version of himself, and was tremendous for them for a solid 3 months in helping push the Red Sox into contention. Obviously, there were injuries down the stretch that probably, one wonders how much that played into it. And then also, Giolito wasn't missing bats as he had earlier in his career and as Sonny Gray has in the last couple of years, but is there another gear that Lucas Giolito, assuming that he's healthy, will have in 2026 when he's a further year out from that surgery that cost him the 2024 season? If so, it's going to be a very interesting comparison over the course of the coming season.
All right, no doubt about that. Again, thanks to Katie Wu for coming on and helping out with the coverage from the St. Louis side. All right, we've got another interview here we want to get to because this Saturday is the Wu Sox Foundation Gala. Last week, we talked Peyton Tolley was going to be part of that. I'll be there Saturday at Polar Park as the MC, and Nick Sogard will also be one of the speakers and one of the players honored at the event. Interesting season for Sogard, right? A year after his Major League debut. Didn't get into as many Major League games as I'm sure he would have liked, but in the end is not only the starter, but is the star in the Game 1 win against the Yankees, right? 2 for 4, running a double coming at the perfect time, and the Yankees were on the verge of shutting out the Red Sox, but the hustle got them going. So a guy who's proven to be versatile off the bench, a guy who's some are better than the parts, right? A guy who Alex Cora is the first to tell you, the more I see, the more I like. So Nick Sogard coming up, it'll be interesting to see. Is he with the Red Sox when we get to spring training? That's a guy who you could say, sure, he's a really good depth guy for this. Also a guy who could have value to other teams. An interesting 2025 for Nick Sogard, Alex.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. This is someone who kind of came out of camp, who, based on the end of last season and the performance in spring training, probably there was a reasonable expectation that there was going to be a real role for him at different points. It might be up and down, but between AAA and the big leagues, but looked like he was going to be a nice, a kind of really good complementary part of the Red Sox roster. Alex Cora talked about him on multiple occasions as being, in his eyes, a championship caliber utility option. And instead he got very little run in the big leagues. And it was only kind of at the end of the season through some of the attrition of the season, especially with Marcelo Myers sidelined for the last couple of months of the season, that Sogard found his way back onto the roster late and then had that kind of hero turn in the one Red Sox postseason win. That was, this is someone who is from a baseball family. His cousin Eric Sogard obviously was a longtime big leaguer, and he'd been around the game and a baseball rat. He's from Sacramento, so grew up, with a great appreciation for Dustin Pedroia and what his career meant. A fellow Sacramento native, and then got to play second base in a postseason game at Yankee Stadium, and like that, the significance of that, of that wasn't lost on him. He truly appreciated that spotlight moment, and again showed that when called upon in a kind of high leverage situation, he has some skills that can allow him to be a very interesting contributor at the big league level at the highest stage.
Yeah, no doubt. From Sacramento, but grew up a Red Sox fan after his father attended Tufts, where he played football. We'll get into that in just a bit. But first, let's get to Nick Sogard. He's our guest as we get ready for the Wu Sox Foundation Gala this Saturday at Polar Park. Nick Sogard on 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers. All right, Nick Sogard joins the podcast. Nick, haven't seen you since the end of the season, obviously, and it's not the way anybody wanted it to end, but for you personally, kind of another checkbox, right? You start in that game, great Game 1, obviously, being an important part of that. What did it mean to you to sort of be able to contribute and be such an important part? Again, I know the disappointment of the end of that series is one thing, but as you pull away from it, do you kind of put this season in perspective and what it meant to you?
Yeah, it meant a lot to me. I think it was a really difficult year for me kind of mentally. So just kind of battling all the kind of up and down and a tough start to the year for me. So to finish on that note personally was great. Obviously as a team, I think we checked off a pretty important box of getting back to the postseason, but kind of felt like, on that last day there was more to be had. So disappointing in that regard, but it meant a lot to me to play in those games and get my first taste of postseason baseball at Yankee Stadium. Incredible environment. So it was a cool personal thing for sure.
Well, it's interesting to think about that, that kind of framing of it as a really difficult season. Obviously, you got a chance to make your big league debut in 2024, right? Like, and that's one of the big check boxes. Like, that changes everything. I assume that makes it also, like, that first exposure to the big leagues also makes it more difficult to go back to the minor leagues, because it's a little bit more like, it's chasing after that initial call up is a different thing than trying to be up there, and establish yourself there.
Right. Yeah, I think that was something that was difficult for me for sure. And it's not like it was my first stint in Worcester either, right? Like, I'd been there for a full year before even 2024, and then obviously getting the taste of the big leagues for kind of the last couple months of 24, and then it was challenging, to be honest with you. But the staff there is incredible. Chad Tracy's someone that I feel like I can really rely on for anything, and he put a lot of trust in me to kind of allow me to work the season out, and yeah, so a lot of challenges, but a lot of very helpful people around me, and I think that kind of can get you through some stuff like that.
It was interesting to think about how you got to the big leagues, right? Like, you became very intentional, I think, in your training in the offseason entering 2024, where it was like, okay, like the Red Sox say, you need to swing harder. So you did some very productive bat speed training in that offseason, got into really a more balanced offensive profile, both right-handed and left-handed, to the point of doing a great job of positioning yourself for that call-up. What would you describe as the progress that you made as a player entering 2025? Like, do you approach each offseason with a kind of specific development goal in mind, or are you more broad-minded about just honing all of your baseball skills?
I think definitely putting emphasis on certain areas. Like, I think 2024, I definitely made strides as a hitter. I think one of the biggest things, while I was a little bit bigger and stronger and was swinging a little faster, I think my ball flight specifically is something that really improved in 2024, which led to a lot more slug. Then I think after the 2024, that offseason, I kind of went back into, continuing to get bigger, stronger, and was the biggest and was swinging the fastest I've ever swung in camp. But I think I lost a little bit of my, kind of ball flight at maybe the cost of that. So I think just balancing the two, I guess to specifically answer your question, yeah, for off season, there's definitely a couple specific areas that I typically will target where I feel like I can definitely see significant growth in the upcoming year, which in this past year I did with the bat speed and some exit velocity stuff. But just trying to find the balance of what can make me the best player, understanding who I am. I'm not going to go out and hit 35 home runs this year, so trying to make sure I'm bringing, my biggest strengths to the table while also improving upon those weaknesses.
Defensively, obviously, you've shown yourself. I mean, you played every infield position. You played the outfield last year. Is that something that's always been important to you, that you can show that ability defensively at multiple positions?
Yeah, I think it's no secret. That's probably my biggest strength as a player is when I have a glove on. I think it was first introduced to me with the org in 2021 about kind of bouncing around. I really had only played second, short, some third. So the outfield and obviously first base this past year is something that has definitely been introduced to me within this organization, and is something that I've grown to really enjoy and take pride in.
And at the plate, I mean, I don't know if you dream as a kid of hitting a ground ball to second to walk off in the 10th, but you're in the middle of that. Like, how cool was that moment? You get to go up there, pinch hit opportunity. You got to make contact. Obviously, you got to make something happen. And then you're in the middle of that crazy celebration at first base. Just what was that moment like? How did that feel?
Yeah, it was great. I wasn't particularly feeling awesome at the plate at the time, and that pitcher had just struck me out, I think, a week before. Um, but yeah, like you said, just got to find a way to put the ball in play. Big credit to Nate Eden for getting an incredible jump at third base and being superhuman fast. So that was nice. No, but it was great. Understanding what the job needed to be done there was put it in play, and whenever you can help win a ball game in the big leagues, it's an awesome feeling. So pretty cool night for me, at Fenway Park to get a walk off for your first big league walk off. Wasn't a hit, obviously it could have been prettier, but we'll take it.
Well, it's interesting because like there's been this like larger baseball conversation surrounding like what matters for baseball players, right? And like there's all of this like these like very specific data driven expectations for what development means, and yet there's also this conversation about like game feel is not in a great place in terms of where the game is. You obviously grew up with a connection to the game. You're someone who has like, you know, who really does have a feel and an understanding that allows you to move around to different positions and to be able to handle the defensive work there, as well as to be kind of situationally aware and adaptable, where you recognize, you know, like if the situation calls for contact, like there it is, right? Like doesn't necessarily look pretty, but it's effective. What are your thoughts about like about the relevance of game feel in terms of defining who is and is not a good player?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's a topic that is becoming more prevalent, where the analytics obviously are extremely important, and you know, all the talk about that the last few years is very warranted and important. And I think you're starting to see a slight shift back towards a little bit more, I guess game feel was the word that you use. Not that it ever was completely extinct. I think it is something that, you know, a lot, I mean, I think when you look at Toronto this year, I think that's a pretty good example of a great balance between the two, where, you know, you have I just think it's a good balance. You can see situational hitting that they're able to execute, and especially in, you know, postseason baseball, you know, that stuff is extremely important. So I think over the course of 162, a lot of those kind of little things can get overlooked, but then come October, they really stick out a lot, and I think you can see the impact that it has on the teams that advance versus the teams that don't.
So, kind of loosely connected to that topic, one of the things that was really cool to hear about after your spectacular game in Yankee Stadium in Game 1 of the Wild Card Series was your discussion of Dustin Pedroia and like, you know, how you had gone to Yankee Stadium as a kid. I think the original Yankee Stadium, perhaps, and got
Right.
and like, you know, really locked in on Dustin at second base back then. What did you love about Pedroia? What drew you? What about him drew you to the game? And what are the parts? Are there parts of your game that you tried to model after him over your as you developed into professional, like through as an amateur and then through professional baseball?
Yeah, I think I kind of fell in love with his play the way most Boston fans did. You know, you can see the effort and intensity that he brings to every pitch. You see this, you know, little guy swinging as hard as he can, and it doesn't necessarily look like what a normal big league player would look like. And he's, you know, he's fiery and he's passionate. And I think for the city of Boston, you couldn't draw up a more perfect player to play for the team. But I guess for me, you know, I was always kind of a smaller player. I think now I'm a little taller, but still, you know, leaner. And, you know, so for me to see someone like that could get it done was always cool for me. And then, you know, one thing I kind of always took away from him was his just the hustle and the kind of just, I guess, the grit that he played the game. I think one play that sticks out that you see all the time now is when he backed up it was a bunt, or, you know, the throw that got by the first baseman, and he's there to field it and throw the guy back out at first. I think it's a perfect play to sum up him as a player. So I think that's kind of something that I've taken from him. Gotten to speak with him a few times in spring training and around the park, and it's just a cool thing for me to play second base in that game. Kind of, you know, full circle moment almost.
For you, you know, the opportunities you're getting, Nick, you know, you're filling in different holes, getting opportunities, pinch hit, like we talked about in extra innings. And Rob Refsnyder's a guy who has built a really nice major league career, obviously. But early on, there was an infielder, had to sort of get himself in the outfield where he felt like he could do better. And I know he's a guy that you've talked about as someone you lean on because
Right.
early on in a career like that, right, you mentioned the mental struggles, right? Battling through, getting in the lineup, maybe being up and down. What's he meant to you? What kind of sounding board has Ref been for you in your first couple of years up here?
Incredible, truly. I think he's someone that I think everybody gravitates towards in that clubhouse. He's, you know, been through a lot in his career and seen a lot, and It's also just a joy to be around when you're not talking about baseball. He's just a funny guy, great teammate. But we kind of joke around that he holds like that perfect balance between being like real funny and joking around, but also like you respect what he has to say, and he's completely locked in when it's time to play. And he's someone that, he's pulled me aside for a couple conversations to just kind of make sure I was in the right spot mentally, and making sure that he knew that he kind of resonated with what I was going through, and could just always seems like he has the right thing to say. So someone that's been very helpful for me, and grateful to have him around for sure.
I've talked to him about this, right? It's really hard to get there. It's really hard to make it. But, when you're pursuing it, that's sort of a singular focus, right? You're trying to get to the majors. As Alex mentioned before, then you get it. You get a taste of it. You get an opportunity. You have some success. Now it's a whole other struggle to stay there and to keep a role and to gain a role. And, for you, how much have you learned about yourself these last couple of years? What things have you sort of been able to do mindset wise to make sure that you're not getting too high or too low?
Yeah, I think it's in a weird way, it's not really any different than most of the rest of my career. I think even in starting in high school baseball, I didn't really play consistently on varsity till I was a senior. Then I walked on in college. Then kind of like eased my way to that, and then eventually kind of then was drafted as a 12th rounder. So it's kind of like, even organizationally with the Red Sox, a lot of like bouncing back and forth between high A and double A when they needed a guy, or so it hasn't really been much different than my path anywhere else. So I think in a weird way that's been almost preparing me maybe for this situation, because that's kind of just how it's always been for me. So I'm confident in myself always. I think we'll get through it as we always do. But I think just the way my career has always gone, it kind of prepares me for this perfectly in a weird way.
So it is an interesting position that you're put in, right? Like, because the Red Sox like you, very obviously. Like, you've been in their organization, They traded for you, that you've been in the organization now for 5 full seasons, right? Like, they've brought you up to the big leagues on multiple occasions, and yet, like, you can take nothing for granted. Like, do you feel like you're settled into the Red Sox organization, or is the offseason a time of that's vaguely unsettling? Like, we just saw a bunch of movement surrounding the deadline to add players to the 40-man roster to protect players from the Rule 5 draft, right? Like, established guys like Brennan Bernardino, who seemed so much a part of the Red Sox, end up going out to Colorado. What's the offseason like for you? Do you do you feel like you are secure in the Red Sox organization, or is it like things could change at the drop of a hat?
Yeah. No, I think we're all aware of the business side of it, right? I think at the drop of a hat, anything can happen. I think, as we kind of saw this past year, it's almost like nothing can really be surprising. It's just part of the business that comes with it. What I can say for me is I really enjoy being around the staff in both Worcester and Boston. I love all the coaches. I love being around all the players. So I'm very grateful for this organization for giving me an opportunity. So I enjoy every day with all the people, and I don't control whatever happens. I can just try to play as well as I can, and enjoy the relationships that I keep building within the organization.
Yeah, well, you've not only built the relationships with among teammates, but also within the organization, right? Like, you're going to be coming back to Worcester next on December 1st for the Woo Sox Foundation's annual gala. How much does it mean to you to be able to kind of commit to the organization and to the fan base, and to kind of form those connections, not just with your teammates, but in a broader sense to the communities in which you're playing?
It's awesome. I think in Worcester and both Boston, it's a unique fan base. I know um, it's surely not like that amongst every other organization. The fans are so passionate, and then I know people can say, oh, they're tough, but I can say with confidence, in person, I've never had one negative encounter with a Red Sox fan, not one. So for me to be able to help out in any way I can. I'm really looking forward to going to the event. But yeah, it's been nothing but love from me, from Red Sox fans, and yeah, just looking forward to getting back out there.
I really do think, Red Sox fans, especially Boston sports fans in general, right? They look for the honest effort. And you're such a grinder. Like, did you kind of feel that connection coming up through the system when you got to Fenway? Like, I feel like fans kind of took to you in all those places pretty quickly because of the way you approached the game. I feel like to the average guy sitting, if I ever got a chance, if I got to live my fantasy for one day and I would be exactly like Nick Sogard. I would bust my ass and do whatever I can. Do you kind of feel that connection?
Absolutely. I think they're smart baseball fans too, like they can see I'm not, built like Shohei Ohtani, right? Like they know I'm doing what I can do and producing the way that I can. And I think they appreciate kind of the smaller things that I bring to a team, and whereas other fan bases, may not. So definitely feel kind of that connection that you're speaking about, and I know that they appreciate me and I appreciate them.
All right, we saved the tough questions for the end, Nick, so here we go. Tufts football finished with a losing record this year. Is your dad okay? I mean, does he get, when he goes back to Boston, is he able to raise his head proud as a former Giant?
He's okay knowing that the Pats are 10-2. So, wow. He's doing okay right now for sure.
Yeah. Drake May has put a smile on a lot of people's faces. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. We appreciate the visit. We'll see you Saturday at December 6th at the Polar Park. It's the Woo Sox Foundation Honors event. You'll be there. Peyton Tolle will be there. I'll be there. I'm seeing it. We'll have a good time. Nick Sogard, great to catch up. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
3:10 to left is presented by your New England Ford dealers who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 3:10 to left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. All right, thanks to Nick Sogard for dropping by. I had to give him a little hard time. 4-5 this season for Tufts, but the Patriots making everybody happier the way things have gone. All right, Alex, the winter meetings are just days away now. We will get there this weekend, and next week we'll see what is going on. What are you most looking forward to at the winter meetings in Orlando this year?
Well, hopefully deals, right? Like we saw last year. Last year was a pretty interesting and active one, with Juan Soto signing his record-setting contract right on the eve of the winter meetings, and then that was followed quickly by the Max Fried deal, which was followed quickly in Red Sox land by the trade for Garrett Crochet. So there were some very interesting interconnected gears that started moving around the winter meetings, and like that's what these things should be, at least in terms of being a more entertaining version of this gathering spot in the middle of it's good when the hot stove season is more than just a title, and when there's some reality to it. So yeah, let's see if things keep moving down the road. We've already seen the Gray trade, we've seen the Cease deal, so maybe there's more to be had.
It's funny, right? The Sonny Gray deal came a couple of days before Thanksgiving. Larry Lucchino used to always say, if you can, you make a deal around the holidays, because then everybody gathers around the table and they're talking Red Sox. That's what you want before season tickets go on sale. And I know, GMs and presidents of baseball operations don't make deals to entertain fans, but we say it every year, right? Next week, the baseball world in an offseason kind of has the attention of the sports world. There'll be a lot of attention on the winter meetings. When nothing happens, that is bad for the industry, bad for the upcoming season. When you get a couple of deals, like you said, last year, Soto, Fried, Crochet, there was buzz around baseball. That's good for baseball.
Yeah, and again, it keeps baseball on the front burner, right? Like it is exactly that. The conversations, and the Red Sox were better than just about anyone at the Thanksgiving deal, right? Like we had you and I both had holiday periods upended by the acquisitions of Kurt Schilling and Josh Beckett back in the day. So it was very considerate, I guess, of the Red Sox that they shifted their timetable and got the Gray deal officially done on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. They had been negotiating with the Cardinals and with Gray, who had that no trade protection for a couple of days leading into that deal. But yes, it is. It's always interesting when baseball. When the talent of the game permits there to be conversations about it on a year-round basis, right? Like that's what we've try to do, but that's what we enjoy doing. And so, these are more interesting conversations than the 12th consecutive theoretical conversation about so who else is a number 2 starter on what other starting pitchers could be traded or acquired. And this is better. Moves are fun.
Yeah, take the over-under on how many times reporters ask about Tanner Houck's rehab, and if he hits the over, that means there's not a lot going on, okay? When you start digging into injuries on day 2 of the winter meetings, that means there's probably not a whole lot going on. All right, that's it. We won't be back this week. I'll see you down in Florida, Alex, and we want to thank Katie Wu. We want to thank Nick Sogard. And, of course, as always, we thank you for checking out this edition of 310 to Left. For Alex Speier, I'm Tom Caron. 310 to Left, as always, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. I'll see you again next time. Thanks for checking it out.
Boom. Boom.